All right, so welcome back to another virtual tasting at Binny's. Instead of Whiskey Wednesday, we've got Rum Wednesday this week. We're joined by David Sid, who is global master of rum. Did I get all that right?
That is correct.
At Bacardi. So David is one of the rum brains in charge of like the rum place. And he was instrumental in making these awesome rums we're going to taste today, which is the Facundo line, named after Don Facundo Bacardi, right? Original founder of the distillery. At some point, Brett will find a picture of the distillery and we'll be good to go. So David, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what your role is?
That is an old-timey antique Bacardi still that is in San Juan.
It looks like a drop ceiling in our office to me.
Oh, crap. It didn't take. All right. You know what? We'll just go back to the Quixote.
There you go.
Reproducing agave plants. Always seasonal. Okay, so David, sorry, man. You want to tell us a little bit about what the life of a global master of rum at Bacardi is like?
Sure. I mean, rum is fun, so might as well have a few laughs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So first and foremost, thank you for having me. And, it's a pleasure always to jump on and be able to speak about the category and about some of the products that I've had the pleasure of working on. I'm the master of rums. Basically, I have the great honor and privilege of working with the master blenders in creating and designing some of the new premium rums that we've released over the past 10 years. Actually, matter of fact, the Facundo rum collection was my first project where I was brought in to contribute on the creative side and on the feedback side of the prototypes. So for the past 8 years or so, I've focused on helping the company with identifying what the premium rums for the company should be and what how they play along together. So the Facundo rum collection, single cane estate collection, the major laser blend, the acquisition of Banks and Leblon, Santa Teresa's partnership, and vamping of Bacardi brand per se with Añejo Cuatro, Reserva Ocho, and Gran Reserva 10 have been some of the projects that I've been able to play a role in.
So the entire portfolio minus the flavored stuff and the basic stuff.
That's nothing wrong with flavors, but I do specialize in traditional age rums, not flavors. That's not
Yeah,
my...
Joe's heartbroken that we can't get big bottles of dragon fruit anymore.
Oh, really?
A crushing day for him.
Why?
No,
Yeah,
you know the one. You know the actually
Fruit's
of all,
it's my daily favorite.
all the ones we actually hear the most, and maybe because it's just there is one moderately insane lady in one of our downtown city locations who is to this day, after however 10 or 12 years, still looking for Cyclone.
Oh, Cyclone, yes. We do get a lot of requests for that. That's one of the oldies. Sadly discontinued, and it was basically a mix of rum and agave spirit.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was way ahead of its time, which tends to be, admittedly, I would say that we have done some really great things over the past 30, 40 years. And when you look at it in retrospective, we were just ahead of the curve by a decade or two. That just too early.
Well, thankfully, we're not tasting that today, I guess. I'm sure it was good. But we have some pretty premium stuff here to taste. Now, if memory serves me, this whole collection of Fukuno rums started as kind of like the private stash of the Bacardi family. Is there truth to that, or is this something that the marketing department came up with?
Listen, there's no denying that there might be some marketing words just not all of our communication, right? But no, there's truth to that. Basically, at Bacardi, at our facilities, we used to have more facilities back in the day, including one in the Bahamas. And over the past decades, we've been consolidating the production to Puerto Rico. So one of the things that happens over time, and this, I can't speak for other categories, but I'm pretty sure they have similar experiences, is that as your master blenders contribute to creating something new over, 150 years at the time of the release of this collection, you end up with rums or rum bases that simply don't have a commercial purpose. So they end up in the reserves of the master blenders. And then, after the master blender reserves, you have what we call the family reserve. So these are rums that are only used for family events or special requests, special celebrations of the company, like the 150th anniversary, the turn of the century back in 2000 when we did Millennium. These are rums that really don't have a place or didn't have a place in the commercial world for Bacardi. Number one reason, they were too expensive to use. And, when you think back 10 years ago, we only had one bottle of rum over, that cost almost $100, which was Reserva Limitada. And you would travel to Puerto Rico and buy it at the distillery. So it isn't until maybe 10 years ago that things started to change for the category and for us, because we have to admit that we're a big brand. So whenever we do something, we have to make sure that we know why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and be able to tell the story correctly to the consumer who's normally paying $12.99 or $14.99 Bacardi to then go ahead and pay $270, $300 for a bottle of rum under a different brand. Basically, those rums were too expensive. They ended up in the family reserves. We have over 300 different rums or rum bases that are part of that family collection. And when we decided to work on this, Maestro Manny Oliver and Maestro Joe Gomez, to be specific, they went in with the permission of the family to pull from the reserves. And we created something along the lines of, I want to say, something around 50 different, what we would call prototypes, if you will, test blends. And that was reduced further to around 20. It was presented to the family. It was reduced further. And then what we did was we created kind of a focus group with rum enthusiasts from around the world. And we basically embedded some of the prototypes amongst our competitive set of premium or ultra premium rums. And after they did this blind tasting, we were able to identify the prototypes that we felt most comfortable with in launching to the public.
Now, when you say they weren't really commercially practical, these, first of all, I hadn't known about that it was your own distillate in the Bahamas. I knew that they came from the Bahamas, but I was just like, well, they must have just sourced this or something. I didn't know Bacardi used to have a production facility in the Bahamas. Now, these weren't just like the same rum that you would call Bacardi Silver thrown in a barrel. These were, and when you say they're commercially different rum bases, I mean, I'm assuming these were distilled to different proofs, or were they made on different types of stills altogether?
In some cases, the answer to that is yes, and in some cases, the answer to that is no. Our maestros are responsible for continuing the tradition of Bacardi. So they have to make what we have made historically, but we also have a responsibility to create something new and contribute to the library that is Bacardi, while upholding that tradition. So if you will, a marketing term, innovate, right? Or whatever. With that being said, some of the rum bases were really just rum bases that were test, perhaps, by the master blenders back in the day in Bahamas, maybe from Puerto Rico, working in the Bahamas. And then some of them, yes, there were rum bases that may or may not have been used otherwise for another product in our portfolio. However, the longer something sits, if it has a purpose and it lives longer than that purpose, then you are creating something that will ultimately be its own base, especially due to the fact that in that prolonged contact with the oak, so much can go way, way different. And our job then would become that if we do use it, is identify what is different, and then how can we replicate that in the future to remake it again. Because one of our keys to success as a company that's been around for so long, for 158 years now, is the fact that we have mastered the art of a consistent flavor profile. That's something that takes a long time to master, and we can talk about that later. But at least in our case, what that means is that our maestros have to then almost like retro-engineer exactly what happened in the barrel. What were the conditions when it was placed in there? What was the condition of the barrel? What were the conditions while it aged? And from all those factors, try to deduct, do I make the base the same again, or do I change the base in my fermentation and distillation based on the barrels that I'm buying now, so that nature can take it in the route that I need it to go, and ultimately I can replicate the blend.
Yeah, that's wild. There's a lot of record keeping, I'm sure, involved in that.
Yes,
Like, an immense amount.
A lot.
All right, well, I
every
don't know, you want to talk about the first one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't have a bottle with me. I'm not in my perfect space. I'm actually visiting my mother here in Florida.
Your mother's got a kick-ass headphone collection.
Yeah. This is the little office space that I've created for myself to make me feel like. So Neo, yes, thank you, Brett. Neo, that's the little artisan sample bottle that we had for it. Facundo Neo is a silver rum. So this collection started off as something that was meant to be, dark premium age rum. I always had the question on, why would you decide to launch a silver rum in this premium collection? Well, if we look back at what we were celebrating at the time, we were celebrating our 150th anniversary. And one of the things that Neo represents is a celebration, just like the collection of our founder. So he innovated, and he, again, a marketing term, but he really was a pioneer in how to make aged silver rum or aged white rum. In other words, before him, no one has any record of anyone taking rum, putting it into a barrel, having it come out with color, and then extracting the color away, but still getting all the mellowing benefits of the oak.
I think that's something a lot of people don't realize about silver Puerto Rican rum, is it's all aged at least, 2 or 3 years, I think by law it has to be in Puerto Rico.
Originally 2 years, now it's required 1.
Okay.
So you need less filtration, but you still get all of the benefits of it.
Well, and you also use barrels too. When you do that, you use a combination, some barrels that are a little bit older that probably in the Scotch business there, or in the brandy business, well, that might be termed as spent. In other words,
no.
Or are you using all newer wood when you do that?
We don't use new wood. So we use second cycle. So they've been used by bourbon once, or American whiskey one. Where I'm saying no is we don't buy after American oak goes to Canada or Scotland or Ireland. We don't buy barrels. We buy directly from the American producers. And then depending on how many times we've used it, then the barrel might be repurposed for a different rum base. So part of what you're saying is absolutely correct. You want a barrel in the right condition based on what you want to make. Now, what your commentary is more closer to is Bacardi Superior. When it comes to Neo, that's not the case, because we got more robust rum. We wanted it to really stand out. We wanted it to behave more like a brown spirit, but with a lighter color. So with this one, what we have in Neo is a completely different approach to blending, with the purpose of trying to redefine what white rum can be, right? So we know that we have white rums like, say, Banks 5, that completely, it really broke ground when it came out. We know that Rum Agricole were doing really aromatic and funky rums, but Banks was something that kind of set a different tone, and Denison and a few other rums from our competitors. With Neo, what we wanted to do was eliminate the roughness so much, bring in the smoothness that you expect from something that's a little bit older, the acidity, not so much the alcohol astringency, and then we wanted some of those barrel notes to really be pronounced. So in order to achieve that, the blend is actually a blend where the majority of this blend is between 3 and 5 years old. And what happens in this particular set of rum bases is that around that 3 to 5 year mark, the sugarcane notes, those aromas that are grassy, start turning into a more of a fruity slash sweeter aroma and flavor. With that, what we did was we added a little bit of 1 year old to bring some grassy notes back. So it does have a backbone that gives you a little bit of herbaceousness. And then we added an 8 year old to the blend. That 8 year old is not filtered. That 8 year old is put into the blend as is. And again, the 3 to 5 may have obviously some filtration, but not a full filtration of color extraction. The 8 year old is brought in to bring in more of the oak notes and enhance the vanilla notes. So it's a blending technique that is different from how we blend, say, Bacardi Silver, Bacardi or Superior, Bacardi Gold, and Bacardi Black. Those 3 particular rums are blended with the idea of mixing. So the young rum is really the foundation, and you build a little bit of layer on top of that. With Neo, we want it more robust. So we start with the 3 to 5, give us the foundation, and then we add a little backbone with the 1 year old, and then we add kind of that fortifying vanilla note and hints of oak by adding the 8 year old.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised when I first tasted it, because I saw it and I expected, I was like, okay, this is probably going to be like, I was, expecting Bacardi Superior, but with a fuller body maybe. And this is really wood forward for a silver rum. I mean, we've tasted a lot of different silver rums, and this shows its age. It really does.
And
Absolutely.
it's mindful of the principle behind Cristalino and tequila right now,
Mhm.
which was something that was kind of started by Maestro de Bell, back, and then it was Don Julio Añejo Claro. But this is basically the same sort of principle, where they're
Mhm.
taking Añejo and extra Añejo barrels and also taking out color, taking the wood character, but taking some of the color out.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And
Right. So,
you mentioned that because technically Cristalino is the Bacardi technique applied in tequila.
okay.
Yeah, totally.
But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, Bacardi's been doing it a lot longer than the tequila guys have. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's a really great rum. I could see this making some really interesting cocktails too. I mean, you kind of just assume silver tequilas are there for some higher grassy or fruity notes in cocktails, but this would be like I could make an old fashioned with this, and I think it would be really nice.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's actually the approach we took with it when we first launched it. We actually created a clarified or white Negroni, white old fashioned. And basically what we did was we played around with it more in the sense of like you would with, the brown spirit, but also how you would play with a gin, right? In terms of this rum brings more flavor. So let's not treat it the way we treat our more balanced rums. Let's not just
Yeah.
go straight out for mojitos and daiquiris. If we want to change the mindset around rum, we need to show rum in different ways. So we took a chamomile grapefruit bitters, uh, and we made an old fashioned with Neo. And the Negroni, I believe, was with Lillet. I could be mistaken. That we kind of played around with the concept of Amaro and bitter, and if you will, and all that stuff. But we played around with the concept of them and included products that made sense. I think it was maraschino liqueur, Lillet, and Neo, and we kind of
Huh.
put it only that way.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. No, that's
So, how many markets is the Facundo rum line available in now? I know we were really stoked when it was finally coming to Illinois, but it seems like it's pretty, small footprint still.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it goes without saying that when companies go through changes and you change management, well, some brands tend to shift direction. So we've remained consistent in the sense that it's a small brand, but we've recently we have a new management team that feels that we can take it to more places just in smaller amounts. So we only made about the first year about 12,000 bottles of the entire collection. Year one, year two. We did do a third bottling where we created a batch for Europe because we did launch it in Europe. To my knowledge, we haven't but now creating a new batch due to its expansion, but we haven't really made that much of this product line. And we do have a limited source, which is the Bahamian rum that we still hold from our time in the Bahamas. So once that rum is done from the Bahamas, we have to then, obviously, right now, what we've been doing is preparing ourselves for what happens to this collection once we're out of Bahamian rum. We should be able to replicate it with Puerto Rican rum, but when we get there, we'll obviously make it known. But right now, it's still Bahamian rum. It's going to be Bahamian rum for the foreseeable future. It's in New York, Florida, California. Now it's in Illinois. In Europe, it's in 11 countries in very, very small amounts. Germany, Belgium, Austria, Switzerland, the Nordics, UK, France, and I believe that's it, actually.
Okay. All over Europe.
Yeah, so it's more of the Nordics, Southern Europe, if you will, and the UK, and as far south as France, but no Italy, no Spain, no Portugal, no Eastern Europe doesn't have it. It is available in Russia.
Cool. All right, which one should we taste next?
So the next one would be Eximo. And this I do have a bottle, so I can bring it up.
Oh, good. You can show. Yours look better than ours.
This is a full-size bottle, right, and a reflection of the window next to me. So this is a fantastic bottle, a fantastic product as well, just like the rest of the collection. I'll talk about the bottle in just a minute, but let's get through the liquids. So this blend, this collection, and we called it a collection on purpose. The reason we don't call it Bacardi Facundo, we don't call it, the Facundo product line, is because what we wanted to create was a showcase of different ways in which aged rum can present itself. So this particular rum, Eximo, showcases a different blending technique and a different approach to aging. This rum, basically, we took rum bases after they were distilled. So at the distillation point, 3 different rum bases at the very least that had very, very specific characteristics, blended them together, and then put that into aging. So it's a pre-age blend. We then put that the allocation of those barrels into aging for 10 years. And in the 10th year, we pulled the entire batch and consolidated the barrels into one batch. So this is technically, if you were to consider it post-distillation, it is a single batch approach for the most part in its first year run. After that, what we do with every batch is we save a portion of the blend and we leave it for the next year. The reason for that is when we pull next year, if the consolidation is too far off the flavor profile to be considered identical, we can then use some of last year's run to then rebalance this year's batch and make sure it does match. Okay, so it's blended in batches. It's not blended after aging. It's not we don't do any correction with older rums from a different run. Every single batch, if we're going to match the profile with last year's batch, it is the same precise method of making every single batch. How is this different from, say, Bacardi Ocho? Bacardi Ocho is a great example of when you're blending and you correct with what you need. So with Bacardi Ocho, we start with an 8-year-old, we add some 9, some 10, some 11, maybe even some 12. If it doesn't match, we'll look for another 8-year-old or another 10-year-old or another 12-year-old until it matches.
Mm-hmm.
With Eximo, we don't have that freedom. We get what we get from the barrel, and the only freedom we have is to use last year's batch and its date at when we consolidated to try to match the profile of last year. So that it's a much more risk taking approach to rum blending. Normally, if I'm not going to say that we're the only ones because God knows what other people are doing, but I will tell you this: if anybody else is doing this, very likely it's being sold as a vintage rum, as that will alleviate the stress and worry of having to match last year's run.
Just as for the marketers, don't call it risk, call it evolution.
It's just, well, I'll tell you what, man, if one of those barrels or one of those pallets goes sour or whatever, it is risk. You lose the entire batch.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So and it's tough to do. No, and it's a really interesting too. This to me is, there are almost some like whiskey-like characteristics to this in terms of the wood, that sort of dry, prominent wood there's a little bit that plays into the flavor profile a little bit more. There's a mintiness that was like really cool. There's kind of like an aromatic, spicy aromatic, almost like Amburana or something like that, right? Because we've just been having a lot of Amburana whiskeys recently, and for some reason, this is a little bit mindful of that on the wood side.
Mm-hmm.
There's much more of the dark aspects of the barrel coming through in this particular rum than in any of the other rums in this collection. Tobacco notes, cocoa notes, the smoke, the oak shows up. The one thing you won't find is any bright fruit notes. You won't find any notes of like caramel, pineapple, or mango. And when we look at this rum, this is 10 years old. And on Bacardi, we have a 10-year-old as well. And when you place them side by side, it's night and day. They're two different expressions of what a 10-year-old can be, which is a beautiful thing from my lens. And this is what makes me very proud of everything we've been doing in the past few years, is really to showcase the diversity, the plethora of different combinations you can make and end up with wonderfully unique flavor profiles, despite being made in the same house. So with this particular rum, with Eximo, one of the challenges with this approach would be that if you want something that's much more layered in terms of complexity, in other words, bright fruit followed by oak, dried stone fruits or prunes, and then smokiness, this is not a blending technique that allows you to do that. Mm-hmm. This is a blending technique that's going to go into the barrel, kind of tell nature where to take the blend. That's why you blend before aging. And then it's going to give you what the barrel gives you. And that's it. So it can be to some people it might be two-dimensional, or but in the sense of multi-layered, it doesn't have that, which is not a bad thing. It's a great thing because it gives you more of the barrel, and it keeps you in that age barrel bracket in terms of its profile.
So that's interesting. So that is example number two, sort of playing around with the profile on the back end, or playing around with all the tools you have on the back end. What are some of the tools, because you're not using, when you talk about having different rums that are coming off the still, I'm assuming you're not talking as much about different ingredients as much as different proofs and different fermentation techniques and maybe
Sure.
different distillation techniques. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, and it's accurate in the sense that we can play around with fermentation in terms of the length of time. When do we expose the yeast to more oxygen, less oxygen? The temperature is the one thing that we have to keep more consistent than anything else. Otherwise, you can end up with something that you're not planning to make. But in terms of the speed at which we want it to ferment, whether or not we allow any other microorganism into the fermentation, all of those decisions we can make. In terms of distillation, one key thing that the Facundo rum collection showcases, and the older rums in the Bacardi side of things, is that we don't just distill in a multi-column. And I think that that's something a lot of people have a misconception. We have a single column setup for our heavier rum base, which, in full transparency, heavy for us is not heavy to Jamaica, right?
Sure, of course. Yeah, of course.
But heavy for Bacardi, right? And then we have a multi-column setup for our light rums. So what some people believe is that we just use the first column in the multi-column setup for our heavy rum base, and that's not the case. The column that we use for the heavy rum base, what we call aguardiente, is extremely dedicated. It's designed
just to that
that heavy rum base. It's about 28 plates, a lot of copper. Its height is actually calculated precisely so that we have the right carryover of compounds. So it's a very specific still for a very specific purpose. And that rum base is what really drives the flavor of a lot of our fruitiness in the older rums that you can identify as like banana or apricot or raisins. They come from the more drier fruits like dates and raisins. It's a combination of fruity notes in combination with the smokiness and oakiness of the barrel. So it's a very precise approach to knowing what we want to make that helps us decide how we want to make it, which production do we change, whether we filter it or not before we put it into the barrel, whether that barrel is first receival or second time used by us in our own, or third for that matter, whether we char it again, whether we leave it as is. All of these variables play a role in making sure that our rums don't taste the same if we choose to make something new.
Sure. But you can make the correct amount of components so you can have consistency after 158 years.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that's where it gets tricky for us, because with the Facundo rum collection, for the past 8 years, and I would say that probably in the first 3-4 years after creating the blends, our maestros had to really go back and identify how do we replicate this for the future, because we have to run out of making rum.
Yeah, that would be that. Yeah, that's why people don't understand. And even there's sometimes a misconception about, because we know that Bacardi is one of the largest rum producers on the planet, yet there's a perception that somehow what they're doing is not artisanal. And in fact, A, it is artisanal, and B, it might be more difficult than what a smaller craft producer is doing, because you have to do a tremendous amount, but you have to do it of the highest quality and of the utmost consistency. That's not, you just don't flip on a switch and have that happen. I mean, which is what you're pointing out. It's not just like you throw something, turn it on, and let robots run the thing, and it just, the right stuff spits out at the end.
Absolutely.
So that's a testament to be able to be that consistent over that much volume of product.
Yeah, there's a lot of great artisan craft rum makers out in the world, and by no means, I tend to stay away from that word, because I know that even though we have craftsmanship, they don't see us as craft size. So, out of respect to the craft distillers, I never use that word for us, but we do have craftsmanship, and it's a lot of people involved. And, one thing that I tend to share in interviews that many folks don't know, the last test to be a master blender, a maestro de ron with Bacardi, regardless of how many rums you've made for Bacardi, you could have made Facundo for the last 8 years. If you cannot blend Bacardi Superior, you will never be a maestro de ron Bacardi. It is that simple. It is the hardest rum to blend in the entire portfolio, and it's the one that sells for $12.99, $14.99.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because it's a blend of the heavy rum base and the light rum base, or bases, that you have to learn how to filter correctly so that you don't lose everything. And then you have to learn how to combine them without ended up making vodka or making something that's closer to, say, a Banks or a Neo. Right? So that thin line of where is the balance of superior is something that, sadly, some folks who have worked for a decade had to shift their aim within the company because they couldn't land the profile without the help of a maestro. And if you can't do it, then you can't be trusted to carry the brand for into the future.
So what did you do with Esquisito?
Okay,
Or Esquisito.
Esquisito, the other bottle. Here we go. This is a beautiful bottle, a lot of gold.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's Esquisito is another approach to blending, which feels a little bit closer to some of the things that we do with Bacardi 8, but still different. So what is this blending technique? This blending technique is we have 3 age brackets that we play around with. This is a 7 through 23-year-old blend. So the youngest rum is 7. So by the way, at Bacardi, we believe that if you use an aging statement, the youngest rum represents that statement, not the oldest. So if this rum were to have an aging statement, it would say 7. All right, but why doesn't it have an aging statement, and why did we take a different route with it with no aging statement? The reason is because the majority of it is actually 14 through 16-year-old. So we create this rum base, a blend with 14 to 16-year-old rums, and then to that rum base we add another rum blend that is 18 to 23-year-old. Once we create what we call this mother blend, we then find what it's missing on the counter side of its profile. Because for us, when you get to 12, and forget about the 23, when you get to 12, the profile of almost all of our rums are driven almost entirely by the barrel, by the oak flavors and the oak aromas and the compounds. So the fruitiness is not necessarily there. So what we did with Esquisito is we created this blend of 14 through 16. We added a blend that is 18 to 23. And then we added an añejo blend that is 7 through 10. And this way we added a layer that those older rums simply did not have. So a layer of a slight hint of dried stone fruits, a kind to like or peaches.
I was going to say raisin. Yeah, there's a raisin, like there's definitely fruit, but it's mature fruit.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you tend to get a lot of that mature fruit, like the raisins, the dates, the vanilla extract in the 14, 16 as well. So they complement each other and they give you layers of it. With the 18 through 23, you're bringing in a lot of wood extract. We just launched a 16-year-old that is 16 and 17 on the Bacardi side of things. And if you're not a lover of the barrel, you have no business buying it. It is barrel times 100. And it's a great example of what we mean when we take this 18 to 23 and we find that it needs a counterbalance blend. If you taste our 16-year-old on its own, you're going to see what we mean. It's just too much barrel. So the blending technique here is start in the middle, wonderful heart, 14 through 16, add layers of complexity with older, and then counterbalance with young. So Esquisito and Neo share that similitude in its approach to blending, which is different from Eximo and different from Paraiso. Now, with
This rum is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too because they're a lot, and you named it's like pick your favorite stone fruit sort of, or they for the fruit, but even the wood that shows through isn't the wood that showed through in Esquisito was a little bit more mindful of the way wood would come across to me in whiskey. I mean, it tastes like rum, but the wood feature where the wood here is almost like cedary or floral.
Yes.
There's like a lavender rose petal water, sort of floral element in the back of the mouth, which
Yes.
I'm guessing is the wood. That's usually,
It's
amazing. Yeah.
That usually reminds me of like a sherry barrel sort of finish that you would have in Scotland.
Right.
Mhm.
I'm glad you brought that up because it is finishing in sherry casks. So it in sherry
Damn, Joe, you're not getting a raise though.
Oh, come on. Call that blind.
He's not even tasting. That's good memory. He calls the last time he had it. So sherry cask for 45 days. Basically, this is the marrying period, right? So this is the resting period after you blend. Sometimes we forget to when we speak about blending, we tend to forget to speak about the fact that there's a lot of molecular instability after you've caused this blend to come together. These rums age on their own. They have their own identity. And now you're trying to force them to become one. That takes time. So instead of doing that resting period in stainless steel, with Esquisito, we use the sherry casks to allow for the resting to take place, and then at the same time cause a little bit of that extraction and exchange between the spirit and the barrel.
That's a common misconception, I think, with a lot of consumers with blending is that, we just, they have this recipe for Dewar's, for example, and it's like some 6-year-old whiskey from this place and some 3-year-old whiskey from this place and this many and this many, just throw it together and it's good. And these things take a lot of time. You can't just put 2 whiskeys or 2 rums together and expect it to just be perfectly integrated. Like they do take time to marry and develop. And it's pretty cool that you're using that sherry cask for that. I mean, it makes sense with Dewar's holdings Bacardi holdings and Dewar's and whatnot. In the Scotch business, you would have access to those kind of cool barrels.
Yeah, and we have a separate partnership with a sherry producer for these particular products, but yes, it facilitates our relationship having Dewar's already, and all of our brands up in Scotland having relationships in Jerez to be able to facilitate those conversations. Absolutely.
Man, this is good. You might even say it's exquisitely layered. I'll show myself out. What's the next rum?
I'll be here till Friday. Try the fish, right?
Right. So do you do a lot of tastings in upstate New York then? Right?
I've been to Vegas once or twice,
Right.
So we have Paraiso. So this is the shortest bottle in the collection, a bit reminiscent of a cognac decanter from back in the day, right? For our time. It's the only one that comes with a numbered label. And to show you, this is from bottles I left here when we first launched. This is from the first run. That's what the letter A means. This is
okay.
Year 1 is the letter A. I believe you might have letters C or D in Illinois. So this is bottle 1048 from our very first batch of Paraiso. So what is this? This is another approach to blending. And again, the collection showcases different ways in you can make these rums, different ways in which you can present profiles. So with Paraiso, we start with old. So remember, Neo and Esquisito, we start in the middle. With Esquisito, we just start pre-aging. With this, we start after we've aged the bases on their own. We start with the oldest. And this is predominantly 18 through 23-year-old rum, hence the price point. And to that, we actually create a counterbalance blend of añejo rums that are anywhere between 5 and 8 years old. And that could change. That doesn't, pardon me, that's Reserva Limitada. This is 8 through 12-year-old. So in the first batch. Now that could change. We might blend it this year and find that we need 5 through 8. Next year, we might need 10 and 11. It all depends on what the barrel gives us and what the maestros create as a blend. But we have to create the mother blend first, which is the 18 through 23. Then we counterbalance it, we layer it with this añejo blend that is anywhere between that 5 and 10 year mark that I mentioned between the two examples. So with this, what you have is you have a lot more of vanilla showing itself in a very different way to Esquisito, based on the fact that it has a different concentration of older. This is finished in cognac barrels for 45 days. So cognac barrels or French oak barrels, XO barrels that we acquired from France. Obviously, also own Jose and Baron Otard, which is a very renowned, not here in the US, but globally, it's a very renowned cognac. So we do have access to these French barrels, and 45 days resting period in this barrel. The rum showcases itself with a little bit more of a creme brulee on the nose. It's not necessarily a fruity rum either, but the oak showcases itself. On the nose, you'll notice that it's very much a very uniform aroma. That aroma is going to be consistent even as it breathes. What I want you to do, however, is experience it on the tongue. And this is where, Pat, you may have to swallow just a little bit. The experience of Paraiso is fascinating because the way Maestro Manny Oliver and Joe Gomez approached this blend was so that it would evolve as a journey through the palate. Obviously, we'll pick up some butterscotch, some creme brulee, sweetness on the front. On the mid palate, the sweetness immediately drops. And then on the finish, as you swallow, all of the acidity lives on the back of the, and the old barrel, the old oak, really showcases itself in the finish. So it's easily approachable on the nose, easily approachable on the sip, but extremely complex in terms of enjoying it on the palate, which most people tend to not be good at. A lot of times we nose very well. We can't name the descriptors, but one thing a lot of people do with spirits, especially at 40% alcohol, they take a sip, they get the sweetness, they swallow, and forget to focus on what happens mid-palate, what happens post-palate.
Well, and it's funny, and this is probably not a great way to describe it, but it does. This is the most rummy of the rums, if that makes any sense. This is one where where it's not mindful, like the style's not mindful of anything. This is rum. And all of those sweet, you say, creme brulee and butterscotch and vanilla, those are all sort of sweetness that's sugar-derived sweetness, not sweetness that is fruit-derived sweetness or other sort. Those are all variants of things that are created with sugar as a base, and a lot of different ones, but still nonetheless with sugar as a base. And so this is, and again, then with the dryness that tells you that there has to be some age on it. So this is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. The first time I tried these, I thought the Esquisito was where it was at. I thought that was the best one of the four. But now going back and, just slowing this down a bit and contemplating a bit more, this rum has a lot to offer. There's a lot going on in this pour. This is really intensely layered with flavor.
Yes, absolutely, Pat. I couldn't agree more. It's a rum that if you were to be served this rum, not told anything, you'll sip it, and I'll acknowledge this. You'll take a sip, and you'll say it's all right, But if you're served it and you get this explanation of focus on what happens on the palate, it starts showing you everything else that's going on in that glass. So it's fantastic. It's a fantastically different experience to anything that we had done before we launched this collection. So
the only other quote unquote high-end Bacardi that we've ever really had in Illinois has been the Reserva Limitada. And now where does that fall age-wise compared to what we're tasting today?
Sure. So Reserva Limitada, again, this is before Facundo. This is about 2003. Different economic situation. We didn't have the success of Ocho that we have now. Superior was really everything that the brand was pushing at that moment in time. So with, we had Reserve, but depending on the country, different successes.
Yeah.
Superior was really at the helm of everything, and it still technically is. But anyway, 2003, what our maestro at that time found was that we had, for the first time, Bacardi rum that we otherwise had made for commercial use, that had got into aged 16 years.
Oh, okay.
And we have undisturbed aging. So it means that we put rum in the barrel. We never refill the barrels. We never tap the barrels. The barrels are put into the aging warehouse. When they're ready to be used, that's when the master blender taps to see if the rum is in the right place, but he doesn't refill. So when we empty the barrel, we empty the barrel fully. What this means is that the angel share that we suffer, like some of our competitors as well do, is an angel share that is significantly high that could lead to zero product left behind because we're not refilling. So we can't have rum forever in an aging warehouse. Either we use it or we lose it.
Yeah.
So at that moment in time, Maestro Luis Planas found rum that was up to 60 years old, and he asked for permission to pull it from the master reserves, make something special for our distillery visitor center. And that's how he came up with Reserva Limitada. Now it's a blend where the mother blend or the heart of the blend is between 12 and 16.
Mm-hmm.
And then that is counterblended in the way that Paraiso is counterblended. It's counterblended with an añejo blend that is 5 through 8.
Okay.
And that could change based on what we get, but that's kind of the range that we play with. So it's blend A and blend B, and then they come together for counterbalance. But the price point of this product back then and even today, just like Paraiso, really represents the fact that it's a predominantly older heart, as well as a representation of what it is that we lost, because with our angel share being anywhere between 8 and 14%, and you heard that correctly. After Maria, the year after Maria, we lost 14% angel share in our highest loss batches. So we could lose anywhere between 8 and 14. In a good year, in a lucky year where things were cooler and I don't know, somebody forgot to turn on the furnace, we might lose 6% in some balance. So when you're talking about that number, as you get to 10 years, the reality is you've lost more than 50% at 10 years, guaranteed. It could be 5, 52, it could be 65%. It all depends on where that barrel was in terms of which aging warehouse. And our facility has 2 sides to it, right? Not that that's any discovery. There's a side that's closer to the bay, on the bay actually, and then there's a side that's adjacent to a freeway. The difference in angel share loss between the bay side and the freeway side, believe it or not, it exists.
Yeah.
The older it gets, it is compounded and it becomes larger of a gap. So with that being said, at 16, we've lost anywhere from 70 to 100%. And that's just the way it is. So we created that blend precisely to be able to use this older rum that we weren't using. It was a success at the distillery. And around 2010, we took it out to the world. And that opened the floodgates for us to be able to make it.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. That in the facility, if you go, is kind of amazing because it's like you're driving through a pretty sort of urban industrial area, and then all of a sudden there's this little piece of, that doesn't look. I mean, once you get on the facility property, it's pretty amazing and impressive to see.
Absolutely.
So
there's an electric power plant or something across the from us. But then once you get on our facilities, you see the bay, you see San Juan, and we're big on sustainability. So we have a lot of trees. And if I could add anything to today's conversation is how much we have focused on sustainability over not the past 10 years, not the past 20, not the past 30, but over 40 years, we have been investing in sustainability efforts to the point that the water treatment and the waste treatment technology that we use at our facility was actually patented by us. And we held the patent until we sold that patent about 20 years ago. So a lot of the facilities that are distilling rum or other spirits that are making orange, some technology that we patented that takes the waste and creates methane gas and can produce biofuel for the facility. We save before we change our still, we were saving somewhere around 22,000 gallons of water a day on site facility. But we changed that heavy distillate, that aguardiente, single column still, about 6 years ago. And one of the benefits of changing that still and revamping it was efficiency. So to reduce our carbon footprint. So internally, it's meant to function the way our 100-year-old still, well, 70-year-old still was operating. But in terms of how efficient it is, 100 times more efficient. So we're saving even more water than that today based on how that column recaptures the steam and condenses it and turns it back into steam for reusage within its own closed circuit. So that is, to us, is extremely important. When you look at the barrels, there's, we sell the barrels after they've been used to artisans to create art, craft. We sell it to other producers, although that's not a common practice. If we're not using it, we're not using it for a reason. So unless you're a small producer who really wants to experiment with barrels, you're normally on buying barrels from us, but we also turn the barrels into mulch. We stopped bottling in Puerto Rico. So, and there's financial reasons for that, but at the same time, what that allowed us to do was centralize our bottling in Jacksonville, where most of our products are bottled. The Facundo rum collection is actually bottled in Mexico by hand, and everything's done by hand with Facundo, believe it or not. The blending, the bottling, the sealing of the bottles, when you put it out of the case, somebody actually physically put it in there, wrapped it. It's a wonderful experience to watch. But with the Puerto Rico facility, what we did was, by shifting our bottling, it allows our tankers to leave with more bulk rum to the mainland for bottling. And most of our product that comes from Puerto Rico is sold in the U.S. anyway. So what it does is it eliminates a lot of the trips that our tankers were doing with cases of product versus bulk rum, because they were already transporting bulk rum for our flavors. So we might as well ship the bulk rum of our traditional blends to Jacksonville as well. So there's a lot that we do, and I encourage everybody to go to our website and check it out. Not only Bacardi.com, but Bacardi Limited, which is our corporate website, where you can also find the nutritional labels of all of our products, not just of rum, but of vodka, gin, anything we make, which I think is very important today as people pay more nutrition. And
cool. Well, David, this was awesome, man. Thank you so much for joining us. You are a wealth of knowledge with these rums. I mean, hopefully we get a chance to, talk more of this if they let you loose and let you blend another one here at some point soon. Or we have to return and get some hand-picked barrels, which we were able to do. It's been a while now, actually, right, Brett?
Yeah, we did. We were able to construct a small blend. We got to work with some of the master blenders and to create a small blend about 5 or 6 years ago.
Actually, 8 years. I was involved in that, actually.
Yeah.
So I remember your bottle perfectly and the blend. We are bringing back a barrel program, no blending this time, just barrel selection. But so we're testing it this year. I think Chicago might be in the mix for the test run. So if it is,
I'm sure we have a Bacardi marketing suit listening, so they better make Chicago part of the selection, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's been great to our brands, and personally, I just want to thank you. As I mentioned to Pat, I lived in Chicago for about 8 years, so I'm very fond of the city. I think you guys do an amazing job. You have a great store. So thank you for having me, and thank you for supporting our brands.
Oh, right. Easy to support, man. They're great rum. Thanks again, David. Everybody else will be back on Monday for our Mezcal 301, the last of our month of Mezcal Mondays. And then next Wednesday.
Well, maybe.
We'll see. Brett and Friends Mezcal Hour may continue. We'll be back on next Wednesday with Paul Letko from Few Spirits. And that's about it. So we'll talk to you next week, everyone. David, thanks again, man. Cheers.
All right, David. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.